quickly go over some defensive alignment for face-offs in our zone. I'm going to focus on this side because that's what the video is on. So our centerman is obviously going to line up here. When we have the option, I would like a right-handed D on the wall, but depending on handedness of the D, it doesn't really matter. But we're going to have a D on the wall always. We're going to have our weak side winger out here. We're going to have our weak side D lined up shoulder to shoulder with their winger here. And then we're going to have our strong side winger slide down just a little bit in this position. So understanding that on any face-off that we have in our end, we are lining up with the idea of understanding our roles when we lose the draw. So our centerman is actively trying to win the puck back to the corner away from our net. But on face-offs, we are lining up expecting to lose and understanding our responsibilities. So this D on the wall, his number one responsibility is this forward. If this forward slides up and becomes this guy, this is still becomes his man. Our centerman's responsibility is to, number one, try and win the draw. Secondary is to tie up his man, and that becomes his man. He's going to mark that centerman, and that becomes his man for one-on-one in zone. If there's a loose puck back here, if there's a loose puck here, his job is to make sure that he beats his centerman to that loose puck. But ultimately, his man that he marks is this centerman. We have our strong side winger lined up in here. Off the drop, he's going to bust through, and he is going to the most dangerous man. So let's say this centerman wins it back. This winger rolls. Our board side D will pressure, our inside winger will pressure, and we will pressure that puck right here. Our inside D right here, this becomes his man. His job is to move with this guy and mark this man on any face-off loss. This now ultimately becomes a one-on-one here, a one-on-one here, and a one-on-one here. With our winger on the outside, now understanding that this is his man, but he also needs to be available to help out in the house, and he also needs to be available that if we win the draw, he's going to come over here to support breakout. But in terms of keeping this very, very simple right now, we have a D on the wall, we have a centerman, we have a winger who slides slightly down so he can get through in that lane, we have a D on the ticks, and then we have a winger. This centerman's responsibility is to mark this man. This D's responsibility is to mark that forward, and this D's responsibility is to mark this forward. Winger's responsibility is to come through. This winger's responsibility is to understand where his D-man is, help out in the house, and then support break. Now that we know what our face-off responsibilities are in our D-zone, let's take a look at a breakdown in a U10 AAA game where we lose the face-off and it ends up in the back of our net. The very first thing I want to identify right here, I want to see this forward slide down more into this area. If this forward slides down, it allows that defenseman beside him to be closer to his man and able to be shoulder to shoulder right here. So that's the first adjustment I would like to make here. If we think about who our man is, if we look at this D wall here, we have to make sure that we are locking on and marking that man. That man shoulder to shoulder is my responsibility. As a centerman, our responsibility is to try to win that face-off back into this area, understanding that if we lose the draw, then I need to mark my man. That becomes my responsibility throughout defensive zone coverage. Net front D is responsible for this forward in Halton. That becomes his man, and he needs to mark his man. These just clearly become one-on-one play. We're gonna let this kind of play a little bit forward and look at those responsibilities that we talked about. So here, we lose the draw, and immediately we can identify this D as losing body position on his man. We can identify our centerman here failing to lock up with his centerman. And we can identify that our winger is coming through here to pressure. Now this winger does a pretty good job of getting on top of that guy. I would like to see a little bit more inside out route here, but you can see as when that puck drops, he puts immediate pressure on that defenseman. So if we're gonna play a little bit more here, you can see right here, there's the pressure by the forward. And if I stop it right here, we can see the lateral gap between our wall side D and his man. We can see our centerman has now lost his man, and our net front D has lost and let too much gap here. Back it up one more time. So watch the centerman loses his man. Our wall side D loses his man, and our net front D, too much gap. So we talk a lot about controlling the distance between ourselves and the man we're marking, and this is called gap. It could be lateral gap, it could just be gap in front of us, but we want to close off that space and crowd players. So if we continue to play it here, we can now see that the space between our D and the wall side winger is too big, and our centerman has lost his man. Now, Halton does a good job here of creating time and space by moving. On this play here by Halton, it's called a scissor. Now, when they switch spots, our communication from D to center should just be to switch roles and mark the opposite man. It's just a switch off here, and their new roles become to mark that man and play that one-on-one. Now, if we look here, again, we have this D who has given up way too much gap here, but we can also look and see that his focus is here on the puck. So we call this puck watching. So on this play here, we want to make sure that we've marked our man, and this would be a box out situation. Again, as Halton brings this puck up and we lose man-on-man coverage, we can see that our net front D has lost body position and lost gap with his man. Strong side D is still puck locked here and has lost body position with his man over here. As the play continues, puck ends up in the back of our net. So this is a breakdown right from the puck drop. So if we watch this again, watch how movement and losing our men right off the faceoff results in the puck ending up in the back of our net. Okay, one thing we want to make sure we do is we mark our men early, we stay with them, we crowd and take away space, but we also have communication, and if we have a switch off, we can switch off. But this is just a failure to identify man-on-man coverage, failure to play a one-on-one, and a failure to not get puck locked and watch the puck, but instead find men and eliminate bodies and eliminate sticks.